It's outrageous, it's out of time, it's excessive, it's larger than life, it's relentless. Flashbackin. Welcome to this special episode of Relentless Flashbackin. This is your misogynistic host, Joey Cruel, and tonight I'll keep talking about 12 obscure things about Back to the Future. As for the car dealerships, every spot in Hill Valley has different purposes in every year. Don't worry, I will not bore you to death analyzing every single location, but I'd like to put a spotlight on the Luz Cafe. The Luz Cafe is one of the main locations when Marty goes back to 1955, but maybe we haven't noticed it in 1985. The ghost of the Luz Cafe is still there. Outside is still a light green like it was in 1955. But in 1985 it's called Luz Aerobic Fitness Center. And what's more it is than an aerobic fitness center? Then, in 2015, it became again a cafe, the Cafe 80s, another main location. We all gazed with wonder all the 80s memorabilia that were contemporary in 1989. But in the movie they were worshipped like they were some ancient relics from a distant past. But what happened to the Luz Aerobic Fitness Center in the alternate 1985? It became the war zone. We don't know what the hell was the war zone, but it seems one of that filthy, shabby and grimy dive bars that you can see in the worst neighborhoods. A dive bar is a small, old-style bar with shabby or dated decor, inexpensive drinks and cash-only service. Everything is seasoned with an extreme lack of hygiene, the kind of dirt that after an health check they realize that closing the bar isn't enough. It has to be demolished, burned to the ground, and then blessed by priests. And I don't want to talk about the condition of the toilets. So even if the war zone wasn't on screen, it's perfect in every detail for the horrific alternate 1985. This, once again, shows you the attention to every detail in the movie. Everybody knows that there was an animated series inspired by Back to the Future. For sure, the live-action segments with Christopher Lloyd are cool, but the rest is really crappy. The premise and all the stories are just all over the place. But do you know that there was a ride simulator inspired by your favorite movie at the Universal Studios in Hollywood, Florida and Japan? During the queue, you can see on the screens clips from Back to the Future trilogy as well as new footage featuring also Doc. And then there were displays full with the movie's memorabilia. The story, more or less, was this. Biff escapes somehow from 1955 and then he steals the time machine. So you have to help Doc to retrieve it, thanks to a special DeLorean built for 8 people. When you were on board, the magic began. I've been there and I can tell you, it was flabbergasting, especially when you traveled from one year to another. It was groovy to the max. You can watch on YouTube a lot of videos that can give you just a hint of what it was. Of course, when you have something so extraordinary, what are you going to do? They closed the ride in 2006 in Florida, in 2007 in Hollywood, and in 2008 in Japan. As always, thank you, Dystopian Age! But there was another chance to taste the magic of Back to the Future again. Secret Cinema is a London-based entertainment company that specializes in immersive film and television events. Founded in 2007, it makes screenings in places not initially disclosed, always in London, which include interactive shows in reconstructed sets. In July 2014, the company launched the Back to the Future screenings, set in a recreation of the 1950s Hill Valley town, with everything from the movie theater with the screening of Cattle Queen of Montana to the Luz Cafe, and of course the famous Card Square with the clock tower. In addition, actors, not the ones from the movie of course, played the scenes of the movie throughout the day until the big conclusion with the screening of the movie. I will never thank enough my sister that gave me a chance to be there, and it was amazing. Everybody was dressed as in the 50s, moreover, smartphones or anything that came after the 50s weren't allowed. Imagine living for the whole day in Hill Valley during the 50s, an immersive, extraordinary and a unforgettable experience. I don't know why something like this isn't an annual event in the theme parks. When they decided to do a sequel to Back to the Future, they wrote a screenplay for a movie called Paradox that combined what became the second and the third part of the trilogy. You can find the original 1988 script online, and you can discover that the last revision was made in March of 1989, and then they chose to shoot two separate movies to save money. However, they shot Back to the Future Part 2 under the working title Paradox to not have big buzz around, and every member of the crew received a special t-shirt with a Paradox logo in the front and a stylized 2015 on the back. In 2015 there are two important locations: Blast from the Past, a memorabilia shop, and Cafe 80s, an 80s themed cafe. Both locations were born thanks to the power of nostalgia. We can see in the Blast from the Past receipt that this shop sells memorabilia from the 60s to the 90s, but most of the things that you see in the window are from the 80s, and of course Cafe 80s is all about the 80s. What do we learn from these two places? Since there is humanity, there is nostalgia. For example, you can find people that say, in the 70s everything was fine, everybody was happy. This blind nostalgia often is referred to when they were young and in their prime. For example, there is a good chance that a person who was born in the 80s will love the 80s, the period of his childhood, and he will adore the 90s, the period of his adolescence. Bob Gale, the Back to the Future writer, had a theory. If in the 80s there is a nostalgia for the 50s, the 80s nostalgia will arrive in the 10s of the year 2000. The rule seemed clear. In every decade there will be nostalgia for a decade that is 3 decades before. So that's the main reason behind the 80s celebration in the second part of the movie. But the future will show that this rule isn't working at all. Until here there is nothing new, but there is more. In the 80s some people didn't recognize the power of the 80s, and some people recognize it, but they didn't foresee the end of the 80s lifestyle. And then there were some people who noticed something. They knew that the 80s would be gloriously remembered. And indeed, the 80s is the first self-aware decade, a decade aware of its own cultural power. And this is the underlying reason why, in 1989, in the second part of Back to the Future, the 80s were celebrated so blatantly. But I have another example of this awareness. These are gadgets that you could find in the packages of an Italian snacks brand. This line of gadgets was called the Fabulous 80s, and is not a recent line. This line came out in 1986. They are really new. And did you notice how the style is reminiscent of the 50s style? But we must be able to distinguish from what is just nostalgia from what is something more. As I said, in the 80s there was the nostalgia of the 50s, but it wasn't pervasive, and when the 80s ended, the nostalgia of the 50s was somehow downsized. Sure, how can you be tired of the good things that the 50s gave us? So for example, we still have music festivals with the 50s style, or the 50s themed restaurants, but it's not like in the 80s. Yet, if we respect the 30 years rule, the nostalgia for the 80s should have started in 2010, and in fact the scenes from Back to the Future Part 2 are set in 2015. Instead, the 80s nostalgia started just after 11 years after the end of the 80s. As soon the 90s ended, as soon we realized what we lost in the fire, and as soon we realized where we were going. And it's still strong today. We have already reached 20 years of nostalgia. It's pervasive. In everything you can find a piece of 80s nostalgia. music, TV, movies, and so on. Yes, there is someone who is trying to kickstart the 90s nostalgia, but I don't think it will reach the level of the 80s nostalgia, which now is chronic. Why, you may ask? There are so many answers to this question, but I would like to focus on one aspect. We are living in unprecedented times. Something has changed slowly, but in a relentless way. Of course, I'm only talking about Western civilization, but let me show you just few heavy examples. The current pandemic is the worst global crisis since World War II. The financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 was the most serious economic crisis since the Depression of the 30s. The terrorist attacks of 2001 were the most serious and deadly terrorist attacks on the Western soil. In 1990, with the Gulf War, an endless list of wars began, and since then, the Western civilization involvement had only 1 year and 10 months of peace. Furthermore, in these 2 episodes, I have pointed out some things that have disappeared in recent years. And I know that someone could say that they are just small things. But I will explain why these are clues of a serious process of decline and decay. Let me start with an example. In the center of my city, there are more closed shops than opened ones, and the COVID-19 pandemic isn't the culprit. They closed down in the last years. This means that there are less competition, less variety, and less choice. There isn't a record shop, a toy shop, or a movie theater, and so on. And when something closed down, just left an empty space, or in its place opened something extremely dull, like a cheap clothing shop, or a vape shop, or a dollar store. Somebody full of nostalgia will say the shops from my childhood and adolescence were good. The new ones are not. But this doesn't apply to the current situation, because there aren't shops left. If something is missing, it's not nostalgia, it's a fact that there is a gap, an empty space, a lack of variety and choice. The problem in these sad years is that when something disappears, there is just an empty space left, and nothing rules, even if they are just little things. Just think about a mosaic. If you lose some little pieces, the mosaic isn't the same anymore. It gives you a distorted picture. If now somebody is ready to say, "Okay, boomer," I don't need the opinion of somebody who prefers to put his head under the sand. With a mind closed in a fantasy world made by influencers, social networks, and memes, just 20 square feet without big horizons. So, do you still think there is just nostalgia? If somebody says, "Oh, the 80s were a golden era, everything was perfect and everybody was smiling," that's pure nostalgia. It's delusional, because we can talk hours and hours about the many things that were wrong in the 80s. But do you want to call nostalgic somebody that says, "I compared the decades, I saw that these are unprecedented times, and I have to admit that the 80s were better"? That's one of the changes. Now you have to see the difference between everything was perfect back then and it wasn't perfect, but it was better. And that's why I started this show, to time travel between 1969 and today, to show that in the last 29 years we had also great things, and to make a right comparison with the 70s and the 80s. And to answer the question, is just nostalgia? Do you remember when in 2015 Doc said to Mari to pull out his pants pockets because all the kids in the future will wear their pants inside out? And we found this just hilarious, because we said, this is just pathetic. Kids will never be so stupid to blindly follow a dumb, senseless fad. With this nightmare fuel, the episode ends, but I want to show you one last thing. Every time I went back to my hometown, there was something that reminded me about Back to the Future. This hotel was opened in the 60s and is called Two Pines. For sure they aren't Twin Pines, but I cannot think about the Twin Pines Mall. If you want to discover the source of the section Weird Titles, I created a playlist and you can find the link in the description below. Please subscribe to Relentless Flashbackin and follow the show on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Relentless Flashbackin is easy to find because the name is unique all over the web. If you want to give your support, please visit Patreon. And you can support this channel also buying these totally awesome t-shirts. See you with the next episode. Over and out.